All right. Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to Accuracy in America. I'm Don Irvine, joined once again by Cheryl Chumley, the online opinion editor for the Washington Times. Thank you, Cheryl, for joining me. Welcome.
Hey, it's great to be with you, Don.
All right. Into the topic. So, topic number one of the day: Derek Chauvin trial and the verdict. This is something that people have been waiting for. A lot of media hype, before that. I kept getting all kinds of notifications about, follow this live, tune into this and do all of this. I noticed, I watch in the late afternoon, I watch a couple of short sports programs, commentary program type of things like that. And, but I noticed that as I was getting to ESPN that, this became a big thing. It's like, I think they were devoting, actually even at 6:00, I think they were going to devote the beginning of Sports Center to this whole thing. So, how much this issue has permeated sports. I think we both know, this has become a deal, but this is everywhere. I mean, to me, I guess I struggle with this whole idea of like America can breathe a sigh of relief. I mean, give me some insight here.
Yeah, I think this is just the beginning, right? I mean, the Democrats are out there messaging that this ruling from the jury is not justice. If you listen to what Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez was saying, she wants more. I mean, he was found guilty on all three charges. And that was a surprise to some people, not all, but a lot of people were a little bit surprised that he was convicted or he was found guilty of the harshest of the charges. But at the same time, when do we come together? When do we come together as a nation and recognize that, hey, it worked its way through the justice system. The ruling was of guilt, and now we have to wait 8 weeks to find out what the punishment is. But at the same time, it seems to me the Democrats got what they wanted, but they're still not happy about it. And they're still protesting in the street. It's not as violent as usual, but they are taking over whole streets where you're not supposed to do that, right? If you're a driver, if you're a commuter, if you're trying to get to work, you can't get down these streets where the protesters have taken over. Police aren't enforcing any kind of ordinances about clearing the streets. So they've basically taken over large segments of some communities in the nation. And it seems to me like they're just waiting for the chance to go violent. They're just waiting for the next protest opportunity so they can express more upset and angst with the supposed inherent racism of this country.
Yeah, I mean, I think you're right about this. I mean, I've been thinking along the same lines about it. They're just waiting for another excuse to go out there and do something, commit some acts of violence and whatnot. The things that we have seen really since last May that have, come and gone. But Seattle and Portland continue to have issues, that go on there. And part of that is, as you said, the police are not really enforcing these things. There used to be a time, I think, when you couldn't do that. You'd get, if you didn't have the permits and you got out of hand, you'd get arrested and things would get tamped down and put out pretty fast. But when they sit back and they allow this to happen, it just festers, and then we just see it spread all across the country, and then it just becomes insane. But yeah, I mean, I think part of this too is that in 8 weeks we may see this next opportunity, right? Because we don't know what the sentence is going to be, and if the sentence isn't as stiff as it possibly could be, then I think they're going to react. I mean, I don't know that there is any sentence short of the maximum time, which is, in my opinion, is not going to happen, that would satisfy them, because they will look for that excuse, as you've alluded to go ahead and go out and riot and create havoc.
Well, I don't even think if he were to live out the rest of his life in prison that it would satisfy many on the left. They want blood. They basically would love to string him up on a tree, hang him, put him in front of the firing squad, put him in the electric chair, and all three, preferably. There are a lot on the left that think that police in this country actually go to bed at night dreaming of the black males they're going to wake up and target for killing, for murdering in this country. And it's so far from the truth, but when you're dealing with the emotion-filled anger of the far left, you cannot reason with it. There is no rationale. There is no room for logic or cooler head discussions. It's just simply protests in the street and thuggery in many cases. And the thing is, we also have the floating out there, the possibility of a mistrial, because there was so much weighing in from political sources before the jury was allowed to do its juror's duty. You had President Joe Biden praying that praying for a guilty finding in this case. You had Maxine Waters out there calling for more unrest in the streets. You had videos from just various players in the Black Lives Matter movement that talked about if this case were to be resolved with any type of innocent ruling, that there would be fires and burnings in the streets. So if you're a juror and you're hearing that, which you are because you're not sequestered like you probably should have been, that is going through your head. That's going through your mind, and you're worrying about your families and your children.
Yeah, I mean, just a lack of sequestration is a little bit mind-numbing here. In this, is that for a trial that is as high profile, with all the potential for violence on the outcome and all these things like this, is that this should have been the first thing that happened. They should have sequestered that jury from day one, because. Yeah, the judge, you mentioned the Maxine Waters, the judge had actually admonished, Maxine Waters, saying in essence that, those comments could possibly lead to, to an appeal that could overturn the verdict, right? Because of what she said. I don't know that the Republicans, whether or not their decision to try to censure her was going, I don't think that was going to succeed. But it probably did play to the strength of saying, just reminding people that may not have heard what Maxine had said. So that she's really kind of the nutcase, a real loose cannon in the Democrat Party, for one thing. But just these types of things. Biden, he wanted to pray. We the right decision. They say that the jury didn't hear that, but that's all we know. We don't really know that for an absolute fact. In this case. So, there are all these outside influences, and I can't help, and I'm not trying to get conspiratorial or anything like this, but with all of these things being said, with all of this stuff that's out there, to me, it seems that the jury also has this extra pressure that they must come up with a decision to convict Chauvin no matter what, because otherwise the result would be, just tumultuous. It would be horrible because we had 250 National Guard activated in D.C. I mean, cities were prepping for violence. So, if you're not being sequestered and you can see this and you can hear this, it kind of, how does this not influence you even to a little degree that, if we deadlock on any of these charges, or we don't if we don't convict this guy, we're leading to anarchy, chaos, who knows what. This is not going to go well.
Right. I mean, you would have to have your head in the sand to at least not acknowledge that potential is there. That's far from conspiratorial. That's just pragmatic. That's how our nation is being run right now. And I did misspeak. Of course, it's too late for a mistrial. It's possibility for appeal, as you rightly pointed out. But, that potential there could set this entire nation on fire from the far left. And if you're a juror, you don't even have to hear anything on this particular trial. You just have to be aware of what's gone on in the news in this country in the last few years. And it's every time a black male gets shot by police officers, we go through this whole protest charade again. We have people taking to the streets, taking over the streets. There are Molotov cocktails thrown, and there are police cruisers that are overturned and set on fires. There are bricks thrown in storefront windows. And so even if you're not aware of what's happening in this particular case, you are aware of the potential because of all the news coverage that has gone on in recent months about similar cases. So that has to be on on your mind as a juror, and I do think the judge did a misstep by not sequestering this jury, at least for the jurors' own potential safety. I would rather, as a juror, be holed up by the judge's order in a hotel room somewhere than having to go to and fro the courtroom through all the various protest lines and hear on the news at night the different protests that are developing.
Yeah, I mean, aren't they even, you know, potentially? I mean, they're known, right? I mean, the public knows who these jurors are, right? I mean, they could actually track them down and find them. I mean, if they had voted, you know, to acquit on any of those charges, I mean, there could have been, you know, horrible ramifications of that as well. Because these, you know, the left, they're loaded for bear here. I mean, they are just, you know, they're just waiting.
Yeah, and you know, it had to be all 12 jurors, right? If just one, you know, held up the guilty pleas, if just one stood fast, you know dang well that one would have eventually been outed, and that one would have been targeted for harassment at best and outright violence and worse at worst. So honestly, as a juror, you have to be considering these things when you're behind closed doors and you're deliberating.
Yeah, so it'll be interesting because, I mean, like you said, we're going to have to wait 8 weeks for the sentencing. But as I understand it, in Minnesota too, is that you generally serve 2/3 of your sentence in prison, and then the last third is sort of under supervision. So whatever the sentence is, say the judge hand down the 30-year sentence, you know, for all of this, then he would serve 20 years and then get 10 years of supervised, you know, supervision by the court or whatever. I just don't know that, kind of go back to what we said earlier, I don't know if that's going to be satisfactory enough. I mean, if people understand that, if they don't even understand the law, which I'm going to say that most of the people will not understand how the law works in Minnesota anyway and how the sentencing goes, is that I just think this is another powder keg. They're just waiting.
It is. And, you know, I think the left just waits for moments like this, right? The left just scours the national scene and looks for opportunities to promote their agenda. And in cases like this, their particular agenda is, first off, defund the police because the police are racist and the police target to kill Black people. And the long-term goal is to cripple the Constitution, upset law and order normalcies in America, so you can usher in some sort of big government socialist type system that benefits the Black Lives Matter movement and the Antifa and the collectivists all on the left.
Yeah, I mean, this just gives them all kinds of ammunition. I mean, I think, you know, then Kamala Harris in her remarks, I mean, didn't she kind of allude to, you know, criminal justice reform, police reform? I mean, also using this as another avenue to, you know, on that whole path of defunding the police, you know, getting more community people in there and all this kind of thing. So this all fits right into that left-wing agenda.
Yes, it's the social justice agenda that Kamala Harris carried forward on the campaign trail right into the White House, and now basically steamrolling it through the feckless President Joe Biden. So this plays right into that same agenda.
I like that, feckless. I'll have to remember to use that more often because that's exactly what he is. It's like,
sadly, right?
It is. It's really sad for our country that this guy just, you know, he doesn't really stand for anything. He can't stand up for anything either.
Yeah.
But so speaking of presidents, we'll speak about a former president, President George W. Bush, made some kind of interesting comments about the state of the Republican Party, kind of talked about being isolationist, I think it was protectionist, nativist. You know, what's going on in W's mind here? What caused him to make these comments?
Well, I've never been a huge fan of either of the Bushes because they've always struck me as more globalist-minded than meets my comfort level as a limited government constitutional type American. And I think this is just the Bushes taking advantage of a situation to, now that Trump is out, now that the resistance is lowered quite a bit because social media, of course, has booted the stronger voices in the Trump family from fighting back. Bush is coming forward as an opportunist, and he's pushing a more globalist view. And there are so many people in America, you can call them all the Trump supporters for the most part, that were sick and tired of Republicans stepping into the Democrat camp and looking outside the country for how this country should be governed instead of inside the country. Americans who voted for Trump, 75 million plus of them, were sick and tired of Democrats and Republicans going to Washington, D.C., including the Bushes, including many of Republican presidents we've had in recent times, and bringing forward a sort of collectivist type view that comes from the United Nations. We need to get along with other nations. We need to petition the United Nations whenever we want to take military action or defend ourselves. We need to put diplomacy at all costs above any type of military engagement. I think Trump supporters were sick and tired of that, and that's why one of the main reasons why they love Trump so much. But now Bush knows that Trump is gone and that many of the Trump supporting base have been stifled by social media, by the fact that they don't have a big powerful voice in the White House any longer. And now it's time to ramp up this sort of globalist vision that so many on the left and far too many on the right have really advocated for in recent times.
Yeah, I mean, I look at just trying to think back on the history, since I've been an adult, and think about Republican policies, with presidents, is that we have dipped our toe in a lot of different places, kind of acting as that, world's policeman type of thing like that. And it seems that with President Trump, what we got was that, he looked at that and said, no. It's like, we don't need this huge broad thing. We don't need to be everywhere. America is what comes first, and we need to work on our country and our issues and all this stuff. If there is some national security risk somewhere that then we need to go and get involved with, maybe that's fine. But yeah, you're right. I mean, this whole Bush globalist agenda, this look, and I guess I kind of feel when I look at this, I think he's just kind of a little bit like, all right, we've pushed this this path for a long time. I really don't like how Donald Trump reversed course, focused more inward, and we're seeing basically we're pulling apart. Now we don't know exactly what Joe Biden is planning there, but he seems to be going back to that more expansionist kind of a thing, trying to restore the diplomacy that Trump took a very hard line on with some of these countries, and rightfully so. And so, we may go back to that, but maybe Bush is trying to put that little bug in Biden's ear, saying, like, I'm behind you. I'm saying, go ahead and do that. Go ahead and, because that's the policies that we liked, so go ahead and do this. But I think it'll be much to the detriment to the United States in the long run. I think what Trump did there was show that, what he was trying to do. He rewrote the book in a lot of cases, shocked a heck of a lot of people, and we thrived in many cases.
Yeah, and we got respect. We got all the respect back that we had lost under Barack Obama, under John Kerry, under that leftist-leaning type of foreign affairs, international policy that says that you can talk and bargain with terrorists, that simply give them job opportunities and adjust the climate change policy, and they'll be fine. They'll just get right on board with being good citizens of their country, and they won't be threats to America anymore. And Donald Trump saw reality for what it was, that leftist leaning logic that says everybody in the world wants the same thing. Donald Trump saw it as the deception of the left, that it is. Not everybody in the world wants the same thing. There are different policies, there are different agendas among people. There are definitely different religions, and you can't, certainly say that all religions want the same thing. And so Donald Trump came in and he made it clear that America wasn't going to play these diplomatic at all costs games. And look what happened. happened? We had the respect of the world again. And there were many, even on the right, who did not like how he would call out the North Korean leader. What did he call him? Chubby Kim or I forget what it was, but it was some hilarious label. But the thing was that put those foreign leaders on notice that here's a guy in the White House that is willing to take on not just the big military games if necessary, but play the cultural war as well and the public relations battle as well. And someone who is not willing to back down from any fight, no matter how minute or petty it might seem to some. He was a winner in the White House. He was a winner for America on the international stage. And now we've done a 180 and gone back to Barack Obama days, where we have a president who is pushing forward even farther leftist policies than Barack Obama did, but he's doing it completely unaware, because I don't think he has the mental capacity to realize some of the things that he's pushing. I think he's just rubber stamping what the far left socialists in the Democrat Party want.
Yeah, no, I mean, yeah, I definitely agree with that. I mean, in terms of this administration is going much further left than Obama, but I think, yeah, I don't think Biden quite has comprehended all of exactly what this all means. He just, you know, I mean, he listens to people who tell him what he should do, and he more or less he does it and thinks it's probably the right thing to do without the full understanding. Yeah, this whole thing. Yeah.
They give him a cookie and juice. And
yeah, here's a cookie and some more milk. Go. Yeah. Yeah, I mean, you know, you hit on this. I mean, this has driven me crazy for most of my adult life, with just watching, you know, politicians, our leaders, in negotiating with North Korea, negotiating with, I mean, you know, Barack Obama and this thing with Cuba, thinking that doing things with them, opening things up or giving them things is going to reform these people. You know, Kim, you know, Castro's, they're not going to change, you know, but they will take whatever we give them. I mean, if we're going to give them money and food and goods or whatever, and they're like, yeah, sure, we'll take American largesse. That's great. But, you know, we're just going to pay you lip service if you think we're actually, and, you know, and that's it. We're not actually going to do anything that will change and improve the lives of our people and open up our countries. You know, that's just not going to happen.
Yeah, you can't just talk away your enemies. You can't appease your enemies with smooth talk. And really, just a common sense, stark difference between the left and the right on foreign policy. Under Barack Obama, every day, every week was a new news story about how ISIS was going to hang their flag from the White House, and they were going to kill the Pope, and they were going to murder the president. Every week, there were new stories coming out. Under Trump, those stories disappeared. And now with Joe Biden in the White House, we're starting to hear whispers from the terror camps again about coming into America and infiltrating America. So that's the difference. That's just the common sense difference between Republicans and Democrats on foreign policy.
You know, with the exception of, you know, the Washington Times and maybe a few other conservative outlets, is there going to be anybody in the media that's going to hold the Biden administration accountable for anything, whether or not it's the border, the foreign policy, or anything like that? It seems to have been awfully quiet. We talked about this a little bit last week, but it just seems that it's just like crickets chirping, you know, kind of a thing.
Crickets and more crickets, right? Yeah, we touched on this with the border issue and where's Kamala, you know, where's Waldo, where's Kamala? And they're really doing a good job of carrying the Democrats' water and covering up the atrocities that are taking place at the border. And I say atrocities because we don't always harp on the children who are being exploited by the sex traffickers and the drug trafficking that goes on down there, and the women who are raped, and just, you know, the other atrocities of human rights, egregious offenses that take place. We look at it through, in political eyes, we look at it for national security for American citizens, but there are real horrors taking place, and you would think that even Democrats in the media would see those horrors and want to correct them, but they don't. They carry water because the politics are more important. So if you take that and look at what they're going to do with Joe Biden on climate change, for crying out loud. As long as he continues to talk about the environment and climate change, and you have Kamala Harris chirping in with her social justice as it relates to environmentalism, the media on the left, the media except for a very select few in the country, are going to continue to cover up anything negative that comes out of this administration, because it carries forth the media's agenda, which is one and the same as the socialists and the Democrat Party.
All right, last topic for the last few minutes here, which is kind of on woke capitalism. This has been an issue that is picked up because of the Georgia voting rights law that created a big backlash from the liberal left. That got the corporations like that were in Georgia, Coke and Delta, to make some comments. Their CEOs made some comments, joined by a lot of other CEOs. The baseball All-Star game was pulled out of Georgia, Atlanta, gone to Denver, which the voting laws in in Colorado are not a whole lot different than they were in Georgia. But then I think it was last Wednesday, there came this big 2-page spread, this big ad about supporting voters and voting laws and things like this. And so this was a prime example of woke capitalism, because they had, I don't know, up to 100 or so CEOs that signed on, I think, for the corporations. And there were a whole bunch more that also signed on as individuals and not for their corporations, which has also led to some protests. I guess some black leaders in Georgia, Atlanta area are thinking about boycotting Home Depot because they didn't react the way that they should have reacted, in their mind, to all of this. But what is going on here with these companies, with this? I mean, is this even a remotely good business practice, or what they're doing?
Well, to answer your second question, no, of course not. But I can tell you what's going on. I just don't have a viable solution for what American citizens should do. What's going on is that back about a year ago, 181 businesses in America, big businesses, well-known businesses from all different types of sectors, signed on to the Business Roundtable's new policy, their new direction, their new statement of corporate mission. And instead of being profit driven, they decided that they would jump ship and agree with what the World Economic Forum was putting out in its Great Reset, which is a redefining of capitalism, which instead of going by shareholders, they instead of trying to please shareholders and bring in profits and revenues, they instead would expand their mission to include stakeholders. And stakeholders include anybody and everybody in the community. So Black Lives Matter is a big stakeholder, right? Because they're in the community. And that's why you have all these corporations now around the nation just caving to all types of Black Lives Matter influences. They're all trying to outdistance each other to see who can do the most for the Black Lives Matter movement, and offer up the most contributions and fund the most Black entrepreneurial type campaigns and all that. That's just one avenue. But then you have climate change coming in, and environmentalism, and all these same corporations that signed on to that same Business Roundtable redefining of their mission, of their corporate mission, and that have signed on to the World Economic Forum's Great Reset redefine of capitalism, are now doing the same sort of thing with environmentalism. So expect most major companies in America going forward to put profit secondary and their social justice campaigns first. And what that means for us as American citizens and consumers, it means we're going to be inundated and flooded with all this social justice crap and political stuff that doesn't belong in the free market. But now it is, because these businesses have decided to partner with the World Economic Forum at their own profits peril.
Yeah, I mean, it's been interesting. I happened to get involved late last year with a new company here in the area that's started an investment, an ETF, to try to address this in a way from shareholders' point of view, in the sense of invest only in the companies that are not overly woke. I guess we didn't really know that we were going to go into that quite, but basically to try to find those that were not going to be as liberal as some. So, I think right off the bat, they looked at large companies, they threw out Starbucks and Facebook and some of those things that were, had headlights, and they've thrown out Coke and Delta and stuff like that. And there's another fund called the Second Vote Fund, which is a little more focused on, they have like a a pro a Second Amendment one, and I think a pro-life fund and things like that. But it's an interesting thing because now we're trying to represent the interests of the shareholders, but exactly where do you go with this in the long run? You can't eliminate every company that trades on the stock exchanges that have any kind of liberal bent, because then you'd be left with almost nobody. So then you have to have a grade of that, right? I mean, but then I think the bigger problem for in trying to deal with this from a shareholder standpoint too is just that can you live without this product? Well, you can switch from Coke to Pepsi, but is Pepsi that much better? I mean, we would. I mean, I think this fund would love to invest in Chick-fil-A, but it's a private company, or something like that. Some of the best companies are privately held companies, and because they don't have to listen to all these stupid people. They're not as have to throw up and say, well, which way is the wind blowing, and do that necessarily. But it presents an interesting thing where I don't think majority of the shareholders in the long run understand how this is going to affect them, that these companies are no longer acting in their best interest. They are now looking outside of their best interests. And that could, I'll be kind of curious to see exactly how this affects their profits in the long run. I don't know. I think some of these are too big to really, quote, really boycott unless you get in just a lot of people. I think right now, too many conservatives are just, they invest in mutual funds or whatever, and they wind up owning pieces of these companies. But maybe if we kind of had woke them up and say, you need to go into one of these other avenues and something that is trying to direct the money in a better way, that where the companies do react better to shareholders. I don't know. Yeah, the solutions are hard right now to figure out.
Yeah, because it's so all encompassing, and it's tough because you bring up the Coke versus Pepsi. Well, they're both doing it, so it's impossible to boycott every company. And the big question is that a lot of American citizens might think, well, these companies will realize that people aren't going to buy their products as much as they used to, and they'll lose profits. Well, the thing is, a lot of them, and we saw this under the coronavirus, had stimulus dollars. So they're funded by taxpayers, or they're funded by special interests aligned with the World Economic Forum and the Great Reset that are willing to fund these companies so long as it advances their social justice causes. So this is sort of the big box we find ourselves in as American citizens right now. And honestly, the solution, it's going to be hard because they've weaponized successfully the free market against us.
Yeah, I mean, unless we get more of the kind of the Fox News type operation where somebody puts up the money and builds a company, a competitor to them from the conservative side, that's pretty hard to do with how many products and things like that we deal with in our daily lives, to do something like that. But, maybe here and there we'll get a few more entrepreneurial spirits. They'll be able to build up companies that will be able to take on the Nikes and the Starbucks of the world and upend some of those businesses a little bit. At least I can always hope, right?
Yeah, optimism is great.
All right. Well, thank you. We've reached the end of our time. Thanks once again for joining me today, Cheryl. Appreciate it.
Thank
always
you.
Appreciate your insight. For those that are watching, always don't forget to follow Cheryl on Twitter and Facebook, and her Bold and Blunt podcast. She's very busy doing a lot of great stuff. We always appreciate it. Thanks once again. We will see you again next week.
All right. God bless.
God bless you.